Mr. James, a hardworking and humble man, had one goal in mind, making his son Chris' 18th birthday unforgettable. After years of separate saving, he decided to surprise Chris with something extraordinary, a brand new luxury car with his own money. Excited, he walked into a high-end showroom, ready to pick the perfect gift. But little did he know, this visit would turn into a moment of humiliation and disrespect. Stay with me, because what happens next is a story of dignity, revenge, and a lesson no one saw coming. As Mr. James stood at the entrance, the white security guard eyed him from head to toe, his expression full of disdain. "You lost, old man?" The guard sneered, blocking his way. "This isn't a charity." Mr. James, holding back his anger, calmly replied, "I'm here to buy a car." The guard chuckled. "Sure you are. Let me check your bag first. Can't have you stealing something." Inside, the scene wasn't any better. Two salespeople exchanged glances. "What's he doing here?" One whispered, "Probably looking for the cheapest thing." The other replied with a smirk. When Mr. James approached the manager to ask about a car, the insult hit harder. "You don't need to waste my time," the manager said with a fake smile. "These cars are way out of your budget. Maybe check a used lot?" The hatred in their words wasn't subtle. It was loud, clear, and cruel. As Mr. James walked into the showroom, the atmosphere immediately shifted. Conversations among the staff died down, replaced by whispers and sideways glances. The pristine floors and polished cars gleamed under the showroom lights, but the tension in the air dulled everything. "Do you think he's lost?" one salesperson muttered under his breath to a colleague. "Maybe he's just here to gawk at the cars. You know, dream a little." The colleague chuckled. "Yeah, probably thought this was a museum. No way he's buying anything." Unfazed by the murmurs, Mr. James approached the nearest salesperson and asked, "Could you tell me about that model over there?" pointing to a sleek black luxury car. The salesperson barely concealed his irritation, sighing as if Mr. James had asked for his kidney. "That one's the new model," the man said with disinterest. "Probably not in your price range. Maybe something smaller?" Mr. James, staying calm, replied, "I'd like to know the features." "Could you explain?" Before the salesperson could respond, the manager approached, his fake politeness thinly veiling his contempt. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his sharp gaze fixed on Mr. James. "No problem," Mr. James replied. "I just want to understand more about the cars." The manager raised an eyebrow and let out a laugh. "Sir, these cars start at $80,000. Are you sure you're in the right place? Do you ask all your customers that question?" Mr. James shot back, his voice steady but firm. The manager ignored the remark and turned to the salesperson. "If he's just looking, don't waste your time. We have paying customers to attend to." The staff smirked as if they were all in on the same joke. "Did you see his shoes?" one whispered to another. "Bet he couldn't even afford the floor mats in that car." Mr. James, his patience thinning, stood his ground. "I have the money." I want to see the details." The manager's tone shifted from fake polite to outright dismissive. "Look, sir, I'm sure there are other places more suited for you. This isn't one of them." The tension hit its peak when the manager decided Head had enough of Mr. James' presence. Standing near the desk, surrounded by sleek, high-end cars, the manager's voice boomed across the showroom. "All right, sir, let's cut to the chase. What exactly are you looking for? Window shopping? Or just killing time?" Mr. James stood his ground. "Am looking to buy a car. That's why I'm here," he said firmly. The manager laughed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Buy a car? These cars?" He gestured around dramatically, his smirk spreading. "Do you know what they cost? We're not running a sale here." A couple of staff members gathered near the desk, trying to look busy, but obviously listening in. One of them whispered, "This is going to be good." Ignoring the whispers, Mr. James replied, "I know exactly what they cost. I'm not here for jokes or charity. I want details." The manager crossed his arms, his voice dripping with mockery. "Details? Fine, let's talk details. That car over there," he pointed to a red sports car, "starts at $120,000. How's that sound?" "Sounds reasonable," Mr. James said, his tone calm but sharp. The manager's smile faltered for a second before he leaned in closer. "Listen, old man," he hissed, his voice low enough to sound menacing, but loud enough for others to hear. "People like you don't walk in here and drop six figures on a car. If you're trying to impress someone, maybe pick a place that suits your situation." A few staff members chuckled, not even pretending to hide their amusement anymore. One of them muttered, "Maybe he's just trying to get some free AC." Mr. James looked the manager dead in the eye. "Is this how you treat all your customers? Or just the black ones?" The manager's face turned hard, his fake professionalism slipping entirely. "You're accusing me of something? In my showroom?" he snapped. "You should watch your tone. I don't owe you anything." Turning to the security guard, he barked, "Get him out of here. Now!" As the guard moved toward him, the staff smirked, their disdain clear. The manager called out as Mr. James was escorted away, "Next time, don't waste my time or yours." The room burst into quiet laughter, their hate louder than words. As Mr. James was being escorted out by the security guard, his face showed calm dignity, but the humiliation hung heavy in the air. The staff smirked, some openly laughing, while a young salesperson discreetly pulled out their phone and began recording. "Look at this guy," the salesperson whispered, angling the camera for a clear shot of Mr. James walking out. "Thinks he can afford anything here? What a joke." The guard, gripping Mr. James by the arm, sneered. "Bet he thought we'd just hand him the keys." Another staff member added, "Should've asked him for his credit score first." Within hours, the video hit TikTok with a caption dripping with mockery. "When dreams don't match your budget. Hashtag stay in your lane." The video showed Mr. James being led out of the showroom while snippets of the staff's hateful comments were audible in the background. It didn't take long for the video to go viral. Some viewers laughed, commenting things like, "He really thought he belonged there." But soon, the tone of the comments shifted. "Disgusting behavior. This isn't funny. Why are they treating him like this? This is pure racism. Who's the manager? Fire him immediately." Thousands of people reposted the video, calling out the blatant discrimination. The showroom's name was exposed, and the backlash grew louder by the minute. What started as a mockery soon turned into a public outcry, leaving the showroom and its staff in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. Chris had just finished a long day at work when his phone buzzed with several notifications. He opened the first one, a message from a friend. "Have you seen this? It's your dad." Confused, Chris clicked on the link. The video loaded, and there it was, his father, Mr. James, being escorted out of the showroom by a guard. The mocking caption, the smug laughter of the staff, and the manager's cruel words were all laid bare. Chris' hands clenched into fists as he watched the clip. The smug tone of the manager saying, "Next time, don't waste my time or yours," echoed in his head. He scrolled through the comments, his heart sinking deeper with each one. While many were calling out the showroom's racism, some still laughed at his father, using hateful, demeaning language. "How dare they?" Chris muttered, his jaw tightening. How could they treat him like this? His father's voice broke through his thoughts. "Chris, what's wrong?" Mr. James asked, noticing the anger on his son's face. Chris handed him the phone, his eyes blazing. "Did this really happen, Dad? They treated you like this?" Mr. James hesitated, but nodded slowly. "It's nothing, son. Don't worry about it." "Nothing?" Chris exclaimed, his voice rising. "They humiliated you, Dad, publicly. This isn't just about you. It's about how they think they can treat us, like we don't belong." He couldn't let it go. This wasn't just about a video or a car. It was about respect, dignity, and standing up to the hatred his family had endured for years. Chris leaned back, his mind racing. "Do you trust me, Dad?" he asked, his voice calmer but resolute. "Of course," Mr. James replied. "Good," Chris said, his determination sharpening. "Because I'm going to make them pay for this." Chris didn't just see a video. He saw an opportunity to teach the world and those people a lesson they'd never forget. And he already had the perfect plan in mind. Chris wasted no time. He knew exactly what needed to be done. After years of building his own successful business, he had the resources to make a bold move. Sitting in his office, he called his lawyer. "I want to buy a car showroom," Chris said, his voice firm. "Which one?" the lawyer asked. Chris smirked. "The one that humiliated my father. Make it happen." Over the next few days, Chris quietly negotiated the purchase of the very showroom where his father had been disrespected. The deal wasn't cheap, but Chris didn't care. For him, this was personal. Meanwhile, the staff at the showroom continued with business as usual, oblivious to what was coming. The manager, who had led the humiliation, laughed about the viral video with his team. People will forget in a week, he said smugly. They always do. But he couldn't have been more wrong. The day the sale was finalized, Chris walked into the showroom with his lawyer and a small entourage. The same security guard from before recognized him but didn't seem to care. You here to waste more time? He sneered. Chris ignored him and walked straight to the manager's desk. The staff gathered around, confused. What's going on? One of them whispered. Chris stood tall and dropped the bombshell. I'm your new boss. The color drained from the manager's face. What are you talking about? He stammered. Chris handed him the ownership documents with a cold smile. I bought this place. Now, let's talk about how you treated my father. The room went silent. The staff exchanged nervous glances, realizing the tables had turned. The same manager who had insulted Mr. James now stood frozen, knowing there was no way out. Chris wasn't just taking over a showroom. He was taking back their dignity. The humiliation they had dished out was about to come back tenfold. The air inside the showroom felt heavy as Chris, now the owner, stood at the center, his presence commanding and unshakable. His father, Mr. James, stood beside him, quiet but dignified. The staff, who had once sneered and laughed, now fidgeted nervously. Chris turned to the manager, who had been the loudest in his disrespect. Let's start with you, Chris said, his voice calm but laced with authority. Do you remember him? He pointed at his father. The manager stammered, his usual arrogance replaced with fear. I think so. You think so? Chris repeated, his tone sharper now. You don't remember the man you mocked, insulted, and threw out of here like trash? Let me refresh your memory. Chris pulled up the viral video on his phone and played it for everyone to see. The room was dead silent, the humiliation of the staff now palpable. I want to hear it, Chris said, stepping closer to the manager. What did you say to him that day? The manager hesitated, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. I didn't mean anything by it. It was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Chris snapped. You called him a time waster. You told him he didn't belong here. You made him feel like less than human because of your hatred and arrogance. The other staff members tried to shrink into the background, but Chris wasn't letting anyone off the hook. He turned to the group. And all of you, laughing, recording, mocking. Did any of you think for a second about the man you were humiliating? Or were you too busy enjoying your little power trip? No one answered. The silence spoke volumes. Chris took a deep breath, his voice steady but cold. Here's how this works now. Each of you will apologize to my father, right here, right now. Every single one of you. One by one, the staff mumbled apologies, their voices low and full of shame. And after that, Chris continued, you're all fired. Effective immediately. Pack your things and leave. The manager's face turned pale. You can't do this, he blurted out. I just did, Chris replied sharply. This isn't just business, it's justice. And now my father gets the respect he's always deserved. As the last of the staff scrambled to pack their belongings, Chris stood watching, his father by his side. The same people who had laughed and mocked Mr. James were now desperate, their smugness replaced with panic. The manager, still reeling from the humiliation, tried to reason with Chris one last time. "Look, I'm sorry. I made a mistake, okay? We all do." Chris didn't flinch. "A mistake?" he repeated, his voice cold. "Mistakes are accidental. What you did was deliberate. You saw a black man walk into your showroom, and you decided he wasn't worth your time. That wasn't a mistake. That was hate." The manager's face fell, but Chris didn't stop. "You didn't just disrespect my father. You insulted every person who's ever been judged for how they look or where they come from. And now you're paying for it." One of the salespeople, nervously clutching their bag, muttered, "This isn't fair." "Fair?" Chris shot back, his eyes blazing. "Was it fair when you laughed at my father? When you treated him like dirt? If you're looking for sympathy, you won't find it here." Turning to his father, Chris smiled for the first time that day. "You don't need to say anything, Dad. This is your moment." Mr. James nodded quietly, the dignity that had been stripped from him now fully restored. As the last employee walked out, Chris handed his father the keys to the car of his dreams. "This is yours, Dad," Chris said. "Not just the car, this whole place. It belongs to us now." For the first time in years, Mr. James felt truly seen. The revenge wasn't just about firing staff or owning the showroom. It was about reclaiming the respect that had been denied to him for far too long. With the showroom empty of its toxic staff, Chris and Mr. James stood in the center, surrounded by the cars that once symbolized humiliation, but now marked triumph. Justice had been served, not just for Mr. James, but for everyone who had ever been treated as less than because of prejudice. Chris' bold actions turned a moment of pain into a lasting message. Respect is earned through character, not wealth or privilege. As father and son drove away in the dream car, they left behind more than fired employees. They left behind a legacy of dignity, pride, and a lesson no one would forget. Subscribe for more stories like this.